All right, Jabosai, good morning, everyone. Let us begin. Baruch Hashem, we have an incredible, exceptional, and wonderful daf ahead of us. Is this on? Do you hear me all right? Yeah? Okay. Wonderful daf ahead of us today. To begin by thanking our sponsors for today's daf, to thank Yoel Sara Kelman for dedicating all the Shirman Drashos this month in honor of the birth of their daughter, Oriya Tahel, and in the hope that in yahrzeit Hashem, the tefilos of all those who are davening for children will be answered b'karov. To thank Teri Czinn for dedicating all the Shirman Drashos this month in honor of their grandchildren, Adin, Tzvi, and Naftali, Moshe, and to thank Shirley Elbaum and Mishpacha for dedicating the shiurim this month in commemoration of the yahrzeit of her husband, Gerald Elbaum, Yaakov Kopel, R Avraham Menachem. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah and the families a nechama. And above with that, let us begin. I want to thank R Kalman for giving yesterday's daf. We are picking up, hopefully you did your homework in Meretz Hashem. We are picking up on Zayin Amud Aleph. And if you didn't do it, I'm sorry. Oh, you didn't see that? You don't use the internet. That's beautiful. Wow. That's not on Motzei Shabbos. Incredible. Wow. Fantastic. Okay. You don't set an alarm either, apparently. It's not that. All right. Hashem, yeah, we'll do this later on. Good. All right, let's say we're picking up. I'm sorry for those who don't use internet on Motzei Shabbos. You'll in Yahrzeit Hashem do the homework today. Where both say we are picking up. It's the only way we're going to be able to keep up with Yahrzeit Hashem. We are picking up with Amar Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda. So both say it's 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 lines down from the top. Incredible sugi ahead of us. Amar Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda. Sholcha lahem Esther lechachamim. Esther sent a message. Oh, thank you. Esther sent a message to the Chachamim. Kiv'uni ledoros. Esther says to the Chachamim, I want to be established as a yomtiv. Rashi says, Kiv'uni liyomtiv ulekriya v'liyos li l'shem. Now, both say the truth is we're going to see Esther makes two separate and distinct requests. Right? The first request ultimately was Kiv'uni ledoros. Establish me as a yomtiv. Sholchula. So they sent to Esther. Kina'at ma'oreres aleinu lebeina umos. They sent to Esther, we can't establish you as a yomtiv because you are going to create animosity amongst the nations. In other words, remember again, Purim is a celebration of our victory over our Gentile enemies. So they said to Esther, if you establish us as a yomtiv, chas v'shalom, again, you're going to create animosity between us and our Gentile neighbors. Sholcha lahem, Esther said, don't worry about it. Kivar kisuva ani al divrei hayom lamalchi madai uparas. Esther said, this story is already recorded in the annals of history. It's already recorded as part of the historical record of the Persian Median Empire. So therefore, again, Esther ultimately is established as a kiv'uni ledoros. It is established as a yomtiv. Good. Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Chaviva must be kol seder moed kol ki zuga Khalifa Rabbi Yochanan u'ma'el Rabbi Yonasan. All right, so the Gemara says Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Chaviva. Whenever you see this group in Seder Moed, take out Rabbi Yochanan and instead it's Rabbi Yonasan. What did they say? Shalchu lahem Esther lechachamim. Esther sent to the Chachamim Kisvuni ladoros. So remember again, the first time around it was Kivuni ladoros. Establish me as a yomtiv. This time now it's what? Kisvuni ladoros. Go ahead and write me in minors, including me in Tanakh. So that's why Rashi points out in the Kivuni, Rashi also says over here that ultimately L'kriya, or L'karye liyosli l'shem. But here Esther is asking, allow Megillas Esther to be recorded as part of Sefer Tanakh. Kisvuni l'doros. Shalchula. So listen to this. They sent to Esther Amalka. They sent to Esther, Halo kasavti lach shlishim. So quoting over here the pasuk from Mishlei, and the pasuk says Halo kasavti lach shlishim, which literally means I've written you 3 times. Now we're going to see what this means in just a moment. Shlishim v'lo raviyim. There are 3, based on this pasuk of Mishlei, we understand that there are to be 3 recorded instances of war with Amalek. Only 3 recorded instances in Tanakh, not 4. Now what are the 3? So if you look at Rashi says over Shlishim, B'shloshim makomos yeshon lahaskim l'chamas Amalek. There are three times in which we remember the war with Amalek. B'sefer ve'el shmos. So both remember again, once is in Chumash Shmos, second one Mishnah Torah in Devarim, or B'sefer Shmuel. Right? So remember again, so Chumash Shmos is B'shalach when it actually happened. Devarim is when Moshe Rabbeinu reviews it, and Sefer Shmuel is when Shaul goes out to war with Amalek. There are 3 recorded instances of war with Amalek with Tanakh, and based on the pasuk of Shlomo HaMelech, Shlomo says, "V'zeu shomer Shlomo b'davar b'shelishuso iyata rashay l'ravo." So therefore, Shlomo HaMelech says 3 recorded instances of Amalek, not 4. Now the problem is, if we include Megillah Esther in Tanakh, Megillah Esther is the story of the war with Amalek as well. That'll be a 4th instance of a war with Amalek. So the Gemara says, Ad shematzulo kar mikra kasu b'Torah, until Chazal found another pasuk. And what was the other pasuk? Another pasuk that allowed them to include Megillah Esther. And what was the other pasuk? Ksov zos zikaron b'sefer. So the pasuk says this is in Shmos, so we'll say this is by the actual war with Amalek. So after that victory, the pasuk says, "Ksov zos zikaron b'sefer." Write this as a remembrance in the sefer. So the Gemara says, listen to this. So the Gemara darshans, "Ksav zos masha kasov kan." So the Gemara says, "Ksav zos masha kasov kan." Ultimately, again, the Gemara breaks up the pasuk. Write this. That's what's referring to ultimately what's recorded in Chumash Shmos. Mishnah Torah. Zikar, so I'll say, interestingly enough, the Gemara is understanding that the phrase Ksav Zos, write this, is a reference to both instances of Amalek in Chumash. Both that which occurred in Shmos, as well as that which occurred in Devarim. Zikaron, Mashakasav B'Neviim, a remembrance refers to that which was recorded in Navi. Basefer, Mashakasa b'Megillah. So we'll say essentially what Chazal did was something very interesting. They darshan this pasuk Ksav Zos Zikaron Basefer to highlight or to foreshadow the references to Amalek. Ksav Zos, we group the 2 mentions in Chumash together. So we could group both Shmos and Devarim together. That's Ksav Zos. Zikaron, Sefer Shmuel, and that leaves open Basefer for Megillah Esther, which ultimately allows us to include Megillah Esther as part of Tanakh. So the Gemara says, Kitanai. So we'll see in reality, see now this is a fundamental machlokes Tanai. Is Megillah Esther included as part of Tanakh? Is Megillah Esther included as part of Tanakh? So Kitanai. So the Gemara says, let's darshan this. Kitanai, Ksav Zos, Masha Kasov Kan. So right here, Ksav Zos, Masha Kasov Kan, Zikaron, Masha Kasov Mishnah Torah. So the Gemara says, Basefer, Masha Kasov B'Neviim Divrei Rabbi Yoshua. So we'll say the way Rabbi Yoshua darshans that pasuk, Ksav Zos Zikaron Basefer, is to refer to the instance in Shmos, Dvarim, Shmuel Aleph. Now we'll say, now again, just to understand, everybody's accepting the premise that you have a maximum of how many mentions of the war with Amalek in Tanakh? 3. That's based on the pasuk in Mishlei. So the Shaila, we're going to see the fundamental machlokes is, Rabbi Yoshua is going to say, the mention in Shmos and the mention of Devarim are separate and distinct. Rabbi Elazar Hamodi Omer, Ksav Zos, Masha Kasav Kan Ube Mishnah Torah, Zikaron, Masha Kasav B'Neviim, Basefer, Masha Kasav B'Megillah. So we'll say, see what the fundamental machlokes is? Do you group the mentions of Shmos and Devarim as one, or do you group them as separate, independent items? That's the fundamental machlokes. Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel. So Rabbi Yehuda said name of Shmuel. Esther, Eino Etavis said. So Rabbosai, halacha lamaisa. Obviously, we kind of know how this ends. We of course do accept Megillah Esther as part of Tanakh, which indicates to us that halacha lamaisa, we accept the drasha of Rabbi Elazar Hamodi that Ksav Zos Zikaron B'Sefer Darshan is Ksav Zos, or I should say, right? Ksav Zos, that refers to Milchamas, the mentioning of Amalek both in Shmos and Devarim. Zikaron refers to the episode in Shmuel Aleph, And Basefer ultimately again refers to Megillas Esther. Incredible. Some Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel, Esther Eina Metame Sayadayim. Rabbi Yehuda said name of Shmuel, Esther, Megillas Esther, does not metame yadayim, does not relay ritual impurity to the hands. Now, both say, now what does that have to do with anything? We know that halacha l'maisa, there was a rabbinic enactment that halacha l'maisa, if you touch kisvei kodesh, they're metame as hayadayim. So if you touch a Sefer Torah, or you touch scrolls of Sifrei Tanakh, they go ahead and convey ritual impurity to your hands. Remember, we had this in brachos. Why? Where does this come from? Remember, I will say there was an interesting practice that developed, which was to go ahead and store truma next to Sifrei Torah. Why? What was the svara behind that? People said, truma's kaddish, Sefer Torah's kaddish. Let's put that which is kaddish next to that which is kaddish. What was the problem? The mice came and began to eat the truma, and when they began to eat the truma, they also began to nibble at the parchment. So in order to avoid the storage of truma or any food item really next to Sifrei Kodesh, they said Sifrei Kodesh are metameis hayadayim. That would pretty much dissuade anyone from going ahead and storing truma next to Kisei Kodesh. Sifrei Kodesh name is Shmuel. Esther metameis hayadayim. Esther, Megillas Esther, does not convey ritual impurity to the hands, which tells us what, Rabbi? Which tells us what? That really Megillas Esther is not part of Tanakh. That's really what it tells us. It also tells us something else. L'meimra, the Savar Shmuel, Esther la Burach HaKodesh. We'll say first wide line. It also teaches us that according to Shmuel, the Megillas Esther was not written with prophetic vision. It was not written Beruach HaKodesh. So the Gemara says, really? Varmer Shmuel, Esther Baruch HaKodesh Ne'emra. But Shmuel said Esther was written Baruch HaKodesh. To which the Gemara says, Ne'emra Likros, velo Ne'emra Liktov. It's possible, we both say, that Megillas Esther, this is fascinating. Maybe the story, your obligation is to say the story over, but to say it over Baal Peh. Right? To say it over verbally. But not to go ahead and commit it to writing. So the Gemara says, Meisi Areza Kashra, Meir Omer, Koheles in Betamis Hayadai Machlokes B'Shir Hashirim. Rabbi Meir says, similarly, Koheles is not Metames Hayadayim. Which Rabbi said, we're going to see whenever you see a phrase like that a particular book, a particular sefer is not Metames Hayadayim, that's another way of saying it's not part of Tanakh. And if it's not part of Tanakh, why isn't it part of Tanakh? Why not? Usually because it's not written Baruch HaKodesh. So let's say according to Rabbi Meir, when he says that Koheles is not part of Tanakh, it's not right, it's not Metames Hayadayim, what that means is, according to Rabbi Meir, Koheles is Shlomo HaMelech's own personal wisdom, not inspired by Ruach HaKodesh, therefore not part of formal Tanakh, therefore not Metames Hayadayim. Machlokas is Shir Hashirim. There's a machlokas if Shir Hashirim is Metames Hayadayim or not. Rabbi Yossi says, Shir Hashirim Metames Hayadayim. Rabbi Yossi says, no, Shir Hashirim is Metames Hayadayim, umachlokes b'Koheles. And there's a machlokas by Koheles. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Koheles, Mikule Beishamai Umre Chumre Beisila. So Rabbi Shimon says, interestingly enough, Koheles is a kula of Beishamai. In other words, Beishamai says Koheles is not mitameis hayadayim. Beisilo says it is, because Beisilo says it was written Baruch HaKodesh and included in Tanakh. Aval Rus v'Shir Hashirim v'Esther mitameis hayadayim. Barus Shir Hashirim Esther amitameis. So what do you see from here? That Megillas Esther is metameis hayadayim, which means what? Which number one means what? Number one means Baruch HaKodesh. Number two, therefore it's Sifrei Tanakh. And number three, therefore what? Well, like you said, it's metameis hayadayim. Good. So the Gemara says, Hu Damar Rabbi Yeshua. He holds like Rabbi Yeshua. Okay, so I will say, the point the Gemara is making over here is, this is a machlokes. The status of Megillas Esther as a formal book of Tanakh, which again, written Baruch HaKodesh, not written Baruch HaKodesh, Metameis Hayadayim, all of that is subject to machlokes. So the Gemara says, Tanya, Rabbi Shimon ben Asya Omer, Koheles eino Metameis Hayadayim. Shimon ben Asya says, Koheles is not Metameis Hayadayim. Why not? Because ultimately, again, it is the wisdom of Shlomo HaMelech. In other words, Rabbi say, it's important, it's wonderful, but it's personal Solomonic wisdom. It's not divinely inspired. It's Shlomo's own chachma. Amar lo v'chizu bilvat amar. Is this the only wisdom that Shlomo HaMelech espoused? V'lo kvar ne'amar ba'yidaber shloshes alafim mashal. Shlomo HaMelech said over 3,000 mashalos. Mashalim v'omer al tosef al dvarov. And furthermore, it says, do not add on to the words of Mishlei. Mai va'omer. What does it mean, va'omer? V'chi tema, meimar tuva amar di by ichtiv, v'di by lo ichtiv. Maybe you'll say Shlomo Melech said many things, and he has a choice about whether or not to record them or not to record them. Because ultimately, again, they're just Shlomo's own wisdom, and they're not from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tashma al tosef al divarav. So I will say, interestingly enough, the fact that the pasuk in Mishlei says al tosef al divarav, do not add on to this. What does that teach us? That teaches us that Mishlei is divinely inspired. Because if Mishlei was just Shlomo Melech's own wisdom, why can't you add on to it? The fact that the pasuk says you can't add on to Mishlei indicates to us that this was wisdom that was divinely inspired. Nevuah given to Shlomo HaMelech to write down these particular things, even though it's true, Shlomo HaMelech had much more wisdom, but that which was recorded in Mishlei was divinely inspired, and therefore you're not allowed to add on to it. So we'll say, so what we have over here so far is Mishlei, Baruch HaKodesh, right? Megillas Rus, Shir HaShirim, seems to be pretty much everyone is on board, right? Koheles and Esther seem to be the machlokes svarim. So the Gemara says, Tanya, Rabbi Eliezer Omer Esther Baruch HaKodesh Nemra. So we'll say now we're going to see is, by the way, we're going to now prove in a almost, what's the word? Unquestionable fashion, is that Esther, Megillah Esther was written Baruch HaKodesh. Now remember again, once you prove that Megillah Esther is written Baruch HaKodesh, then what? What does that automatically tell us? Right? That it's Metameis Hayada, that it's included in Tanakh, right? And therefore Metameis Hayada. Now what I want to point out to you, which is very interesting, is that Megillah Esther is the first sefer of the post-prophetic era. Remember again, there is no Navi. That's the whole chap of the story of the Megillah. The whole chap of the story of Purim is everything before Megillah Esther. There was a Navi who told us what was going on and what was happening and how things were unfolding. The whole incredible nature of Megillah Esther is there is no Navi. There is no Navi. Yet, despite the fact that there is no Navi, the Gemara is telling us that Megillah Esther was written Beruach HaKodesh. Beruach HaKodesh. So Mordechai wasn't a Navi, Esther wasn't a Neviah, but ultimately as authors of the Megillah, when the story was written through Ruach HaKodesh. They were given divine wisdom. So it's interesting. So the Ruach HaKodesh of Megillah Esther is after the fact. In other words, after the story unfolded, the recording of the story was done Baruch HaKodesh. You'll see in just a moment how that works. So watch this. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Esther Baruch HaKodesh Nemra Shneemar Vayomer Haman Belibo. So I'll say, so listen to this. So the pasuk here says, Vayomer Haman Belibo. Right? Haman said, this will say, by the way, is where Achashverosh is already beginning to anger with Haman. And remember again, he realizes he never rewarded Mordechai. So he calls in Haman and he said, what should we do to the man? Asher Melech HaFeitz Believe, right? What should we do to the man? How should we reward him? So Vayomer Haman Belibo, Haman says to himself, who is the king talking about? Who is the king talking about? Me. So what says in this? Rabbi Eliezer says, I'll show you the proof that the Megillah was written Baruch HaKodesh. How do you know that? Because the pasuk says Haman said in his heart. And I will say, what's the obvious proof? How does anyone know what Haman's saying in his heart? Rather, it must be that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave Esther and Mordechai Ruach HaKodesh when they were writing down the Megillah. Rabbi Akiva says, Rabbi Akiva Omer Esther Baruch HaKodesh Nemra Sheneemar Vati Esther Nosas Chein Be'inei Kol Ra'eha. Esther found favor in the eyes of all that saw her. Once again, how do you know if you really find favor in the eyes of people who see you? So again, Rabbi Akiva also saying clear that the Megillah was written Baruch HaKodesh. Rabbi Meir says, Es Baruch HaKodesh Nemra Shneemar Vayivoda Hadavar LeMordechai. Rabbi say this is the assassination attempt of Big Son and Seresh. Or I should say the assassination attempt on Achashverosh's life by Big Son and Seresh. Vayivoda Hadavar LeMordechai. The matter became known to Mordechai. How did the matter become known to Mordechai? It must have been that HaKadosh Baruch Hu informed him. So all proves that the Megillah is written Baruch HaKodesh. Rabbi Yossi ben Dormaskis Omer Esther Baruch HaKodesh Ne'emra Shene'emar Ubabiza Lo Shalchu Es Yadam. But listen to this. The pasuk says that after the Jews overcame their enemies in Shushan, they did not take any of the spoils. Now, how would you know if no one took any of the spoils? How would they know that? So I said these are all different psukim that a person could not know, right? Information that you could not know on your own. Amar Shmuel. So let's listen to this. Shmuel says, Ihavi Hasam, Hava Mina Milsa Dadifa Mikulu. Shmuel says, guys, good job. But I'll tell you even the best proof. Shneimar, Kimo v'kiblu. Listen to this, at the end of the Megillah. So the Megillah says, Kimo v'kiblu Yehudim alei v'alzara. Now, the literal title of the pasuk is Kimo v'kiblu. The Jews accepted upon themselves and their offspring to accept this as a Yom Tov. But listen to this. Kimo lemala, mashe kiblu lemata. That ultimately, again, in Shamayim, they accepted this new Yom Tov as well. That when ultimately, again, ultimately they upheld in the celestial sphere that which was established in this earth. Now, how would you know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was happy with the creation of this new Yom Tov if there wasn't Ruach HaKodesh? Incredible. So Amar Rava says, L'kulhu islu pircha, lebar midishmo delisle pircha. So let's listen to this. So Rava says, the truth is, these are all good proofs, but they can all be refuted. They can all be refuted with the exception of Shmuel's proof. How can you refute all the previous proofs? Rabbi say, watch this. Listen to this. To Rabbi Eliezer, Svarahu. So Rabbi say, listen to this. Remember, what was Rabbi Eliezer's proof? Rabbi Eliezer's proof was, Vayomer Haman Belibo. So the Rabbi say, you don't need Ruach HaKodesh to know that. Right? Because at the end, excuse me. Rabbi Eliezer says, Svarahu. It's a svara. To lo hava inish dechashav l'malko kavase. Bose makes total sense that when Achashverosh is speaking about rewarding someone who is very close and near and dear to him, it's normal that Haman would automatically assume who is he talking about? Haman. And by the way, we also would have assumed, without the rest of the storyline, without the narrator helping us, that he was talking about Haman. V'hai ki mafish tova v'amar adai de denafshi ka'amar. So the Gemara says, therefore, in other words, you don't need Ruach HaKodesh to understand that Haman, when Achashverosh is talking to him, that Haman thought that it was him whom the king would want to do a lot for. The Gemara says, Rabbi Akiva. Remember, what was Rabbi Akiva's proof? Vati Esther nosas chein be'inei kol ra'eha. Esther found favor in the eyes of everyone who saw her. So you don't need Ruach HaKodesh, and I'll tell you why. Rabbi Elazar, da'amar malamid shekol echad ve'echad nidmisa lo ku'umaso. But we're going to see this in the Agarata a little bit later on, that one of the great miracles was, Achashverosh had an empire of 127 countries, which means a lot of different types of nations and a lot of different types of cultures. Part of the miracle is that everyone felt that Esther was one of them. And I said, the Gemara says something very interesting. It doesn't have to be as Ruach HaKodesh. Esther heard people talking. She heard people talking. So she heard people saying, the queen is like us. The queen is one of us. So it doesn't require Ruach HaKodesh. She literally heard it. Next, V'had Rabbi Meir, Dilma Rabbi Chia bar Abba. What was Rabbi Meir? Rabbi Meir said, Vayivada hadavar leMordechai. Mordechai found out about the assassination plot. So Rabbi Meir says it must be Ruach HaKodesh. So the Gemara says maybe not. Dilma Rabbi Chia bar Abba da'amar. Big son v'seresh shnei tarshim hayu. So also remember again, we're going to see this later on in the Agadat Rabbosai. You're going to see one of the most incredible parts of Maseches Megillah is we're going to pretty much go through the Megillah line by line. Well, not the whole Megillah, but good parts of the Megillah line by line, and understand beautiful Agarata associated with the Megillah. One of the things that's going to come up is we're going to see how did Mordechai know about the assassination attempt. Big son and Seresh were Tarshim. That was their nationality. They were speaking in Tarshian tongue because they assumed no one understood it. Little did they know Mordechai was a member of the Sanhedrin. And as a member of the Sanhedrin, you had to speak 70 languages. He understood, he overheard them. So they didn't even bother to hide their plan because they just figured no one understands what we're saying. And therefore again, halacha l'maisa, Mordechai understood. So it didn't require Ruach HaKodesh. He just overheard them. V'hai Rabbi Yossi bar Damascus. What did Rabbi Yossi bar Damascus? Rabbi Yossi who said, Ubabiza lo shalchu yadam. The Jews did not go ahead and take any of the spoils. Doesn't that require Ruach HaKodesh? Dilma Pristaki Shador. Maybe messengers sent word to Mordechai and Esther saying it's incredible. The Jews have overcome their enemies, yet they're not taking any of the spoils. Good. So the Gemara says the Shmuel Badei Les Lepercha, but Shmuel's proof. So both says Shmuel's proof of Kimu v'Kiblu, Kimu lemala, Mashe Kiblu lemata, Vadei Les Lepercha. Ultimately, again, that does not have any refutation. So they both say, this is so sweet. Amar Ravina says, Hanu Darmi, which is what people say, Tava Chada Pilpalta Charifta Mimali Tsani Kari. This is the famous adage. People use this all the time, right? One sharp pepper is better than a basket full of melons. It sounds much better in the Aramaic, but you understand. In other words, we'll say what the idea is. One sharp pepper, one gives more flavor than a whole basket of melons. So one opinion, ultimately, again, if Shmuel is more powerful than all of the other opinions mentioned before. But what I do want to point out from you here is you see the Gemara itself coming to the conclusion that Esther Beruach HaKodesh Ne'emra. Megillah's Esther was written Beruach HaKodesh. Machlokes as to how we know it, but that's where the Gemara is settling on this. Esther was written Beruach HaKodesh. If Esther was written Beruach HaKodesh, then what? Then Halacha L'Maisa. And Halacha L'Maisa, it is included in Kisvei Kodesh. It is included in Tanakh, as we know. And Halacha L'Maisa, that means it's Metame Es Hayadayim. Ultimately, again, it conveys ritual impurity to the hands. Incredible. So the Gemara goes weiter. Rabbi Yosef Armehacha. But Rabbi Yosef gives another proof that Esther was written Beruach HaKodesh. So the Gemara says as follows, V'yimei Purim ha'ela lo ya'avru misoch ha'Yehudim. The Jews will never stop celebrating Purim. They will say, now how can you ever make a statement like that about what's going to happen? The Jews will never stop celebrating Purim. So Bosai said, obviously in order to be able to make a statement like that, ultimately, again, in order to make a statement like that, so you have to go ahead and have Ruach HaKodesh. I'll tell you something. Lo Yosuf Mizaram. Ultimately, again, their memory will never depart from their generation. So be able to make a statement like that Purim is going to remain part of all of Klal Yisrael for all generations. Obviously, I'll just say something amazing. Somebody sent me, I have a person who I know who has a hobby of collecting, like unique Judaica. So they have like these auction houses for Judaica, and he sent me something that he was looking at, which was a Megillah Esther that was hidden in Auschwitz. And it's a Megillah, a tiny little Megillah, which is just absolutely incredible. He sent us to me. I'm looking at this Gemara that here the Megillah says, how do you know Megillah Esther was written ultimately Ruach HaKodesh, ultimately V'yimei Purim lo ya'avru misoch ha'Yehudim, v'zichram lo Yosef mizar'am. That no matter what happens to Klal Yisrael, the Megillah says, Purim always be. You understand, like the prophetic import of that is not just that the actual reading of the Megillah will remain part of Klal Yisrael, but ultimately, again, the Purim story, because isn't the story of Klal Yisrael, like we mentioned last week, isn't the story of Klal Yisrael the story of Purim? I will say, I somehow forgot to mention it on Shabbos. I will say, just Erev Shabbos, there was a levaya for this 26-year-old man from Eretz Yisrael, Yehuda Dinterman, Hashem Yikom Domo, who was murdered on his way home from an outpost in Chomesh, right? This was the terror attack on these three young men who were driving home they have this yeshiva on this hilltop in Chomesh, and about 25 years old, father of a young child, and it seems to clearly was just a precious neshama who was moser nefesh for Am Yisrael, for Eretz Yisrael, for Torah Yisrael. I will say, but it's an incredible thing. It's an incredible thing. So what are they going to do? So now they're pushing that they should legalize the yeshiva and legalize, the community in Chomesh. It's just this is Klal Yisrael, right? And this is Purim, right? Purim is a story of you face overwhelming odds, and even when you win, you didn't totally win because you win, but there are scars and there's difficulties and there's a peckle, but yet you find a way to move forward. You just constantly find a way to move forward. And that's the Megillah says, V'zichram lo Yosef mizaram, lo yavru miso chayehudim. That's how you know Esther's written Baruch HaKodesh. Because like I said last week, Purim is a story of Klal Yisrael. Nothing ever ends happily ever after, but we keep moving forward, we keep growing, we keep building. So incredible. So Gemara goes weiter. Matanos Levionim. So we'll say, we'll get some very interesting halacha l'maisi now as well. Tani Rav Yosef. So we'll say, Mishloach manos ishre'eu. We'll say, listen to this. What's the halacha of shalach manos? So we'll say, I just want to mention, by the way, we have the notebooks, or we had the notebooks, I guess they're in the office, right? I'll bring them out afterwards. For Masechus Megillah, please take one, record notes, because we're going to finish this a couple of months in advance of Purim, but we're literally seeing all of the sugyas. So we'll say, what's shalach manos? What's the halacha of shalach manos? Umishloach manos ishre'eu. What do you have to do? Shtei manos li'ish echad. We'll say the mitzvah of shalach manos is 2 food items to one person. 2 food items to one person. Matanos levionim. What's matanos levionim? Shtei matanos l'shnei bnei adam. We'll say matanos levionim is 2 gifts to 2 people, or really, in other words, 1 gift each to 2 people. So matanos levionim means I have to give money, right, to 2 people, right, or a gift of some sort to 2 people. Shalach manos is 2 food items to 1 person. Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya, Shadlei Rabbi Oshia. Let's get ready for this. Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya sent Rabbi Oshia, Amto de Igla Tilsa, the Garba de Chamra. So he sent him for Shalach Manas. Listen to this Shalach Manas, right? The thigh of a 3rd-born calf, or a calf that had reached 1/3 of its maturity. In other words, the best cut of meat, the thigh of a calf, and a bottle of wine. So ultimately, again, what does Rabbi Oshia respond? Rabbi Oshia responds, Shalach Lei Amud Beis, Kayamta banu rabbeinu mishloach manos ishre'eu. That's a shalach manos, right? Right, the thigh of a calf and a bottle of wine. That's a shalach manos. So the Gemara says, Rashi says that trei manos ika. So I will say, so I'll just point out to you something very. Well, actually, let's read the rest of the Gemara. Then we'll do the halacha l'maisa, because a lot of very interesting halacha l'maisa over here over what constitutes shalach manos. So the Gemara says, Kayamta banu rabbeinu umishloach manos. Rabbi say the Gra takes out that phrase umatanos le'avyonim. He removes that. That doesn't belong there. If you notice, by the way, Rashi in his Girsa doesn't have it either. So, right, you fulfilled shalach manos because again, that's 2 items, right? Ultimately, again, a piece of meat and a bottle of wine, which you all see from this Gemara is very important, which is that a drink also counts as part of shalach manos. Rabba, Shadr lemari barmar biyada baye. Mala taska de kashua, or mala kasa de kimcha de afshuna. So I will say a very interesting, listen to this. So Rabbah had sent to Mari Bar Mar, and Abai was the shaliach. Abai was the messenger. He sent it to Rabbi. What did he send him? Mala taska de kavsha. He sent him a basket. Rashi says a sack, like a bag, right? A basket filled with dates. Or mala kasa kimcha de afshuna. And a cup filled with roasted flour. Rashi says, Davshuna, Shinisyav Shuachitim Betanor, Ba'odan Karmel V'Kemach Shlan Masach Liolam. So apparently if you roast flour, you roast grain kernels, it produces sweet flour. But it's edible. It's edible in that state. So he sent them a basket of dates, right? And a basket of this roasted grain kernels, grain flour. Amar Abaye says, like, listen, Rabbi, I'll deliver this shalach manos, but I got to tell you, Hashta Amar Mari. So Abaye delivers it, and he said, Mari's going to say, or Mari did say, Ichak la malka lehavik dikula mitzavari lo nachas. If the farmer becomes a king, does he not remove the feed basket from his neck? In other words, which he was saying to Rabbah, that's poor man's shalach manos. You could do better than that. Right? You could do better than, I was supposed to say, which is actually something very interesting, because what it's saying is that what it seems to be saying over here is that halacha l'maisa, shalach manos have to have some level of importance, and that importance has to be reflective of the person who's giving it and the person who is receiving it. So ultimately, again, Murray is not saying this, but Abaye is going to say, Murray is going to say, Rebbe, if the farmer becomes a king, doesn't he take the feed basket off his neck? In other words, that this would, now remember, we'll say, Rabbah was the head of Pompadisa, right? He was the Rav of Pompadisa. He was the highest ranking official in the city of Popedish, which was a Torah center. So, and he was wealthy as a result of that position. So you got to do a little better. You got to up your game. Up your Shalach Manas game a little bit over here. So listen to this. Hadar Shadale Ihu, Malay Taska de Zangvila, or Malay Kaska de Palpata Aricha. So we'll say now Mari sent back with Abaye another Shalach Manas. What did he send back? He sent back a basket filled with ginger and a cup filled with long peppers. Amr Abaye, now we'll say, so Abaye says now to Mari, Hashta Amr Mar, now ultimately again Rabbi Huda Nasiya is going to say, Hashta Amar, Ana Shadri Lechuye, I sent you something sweet. Viu Shadri Lechorfa, and you're sending me something bitter. Right? So we'll say, so interestingly enough, it seems to be that Abaye is the one who's kind of like telling each of them, you got to do a little bit better in the Shalach Manas department. So I will say, so I just want to point out here, just pause here for just a moment, because this is actually the end of the Shalach Manas. So I will say, about Shalach Manas, sometimes regarding Shalach Manas, there's a little bit of confusion with what the halacha is. So the halacha with Shalach Manas, I just want to point out to you over here is in Siman Tov Reish Tzadikei Sif Daled. So listen to the halacha. Chayiv l'shloach lechaveiro shtei manos basar o shel minei ma'achalim. A person is obligated to go ahead and send his friend 2 portions of food, either 2 portions of meat or 2 different types of food. Shene'emar mishloach manos ish re'ehu shtei manos leish echad. 2 items to one person. I will say, what I want to point out to you is, there is no obligation for the 2 items to be separate brachas. Right? There is no such obligation. Right? All you need is 2 separate items. In other words, what you can't do is send 2 of the same thing. Right? So I can't send, 2 chalas. Right? 2 chalas. So I could send the challah and the bottle of wine. I could send the challah and a piece of meat. I could send a piece of meat and in other words, they don't have to be 2. I keep on giving 2 examples of 2 different brachas, right? But halacha l'maisa, they need not be of 2 separate brachas, right? They just have to be 2 distinct items, and ultimately halacha l'maisa, they could also go ahead and one other thing is they have to be ready to eat. Right? In other words, you cannot send, I will say it's always interesting that sometimes people do like these very elaborate Shalach Manas, right? But a lot of times it includes raw foods, right? The pasta, this or that. That's fine. In other words, if you have that in there with other stuff, that's fine. You want to make it look pretty, that's not a problem. But the mitzvah of Shalach Manas is 2 ready-to-eat items, again, that are separate and distinct items. What we also see from this Gemara is, you could use a liquid, you could use a beverage, right? Because after all, again, we saw that before, the thigh of the calf and the bottle of wine. We'll see another couple of halachas, interesting, but again, So let's go weiter. So the Gemara says weiter. So the Gemara says, Amr Abaye says, Hainu da'ami inshi. I'm sorry, I skipped. Amr Abaye, Kinafki mi beimar. So listen to this, Abaye says, when I left the house of Mar, Rashi says, Kishiatzasi mi beis Adoni Rabba. Leilech lebeis Abamari or Mari bar Mar Hayisi Sebeis. So Abaye is talking. So because Abaye was kind of the shaliach, but just another interesting discussion which we're not going to get into now just because of time, is whether or not Shalach Manas has to be sent through an agent. This is a fascinating discussion in the Rishonim, because the lashon of Mishloach Manos seems to indicate that you need a shaliach, you need an intermediary. So there is a whole discussion regarding Shalach Manas of, do you fulfill the mitzvah if you deliver it yourself? We paskin halacha l'maisa, yes, but I'm just sensitizing you to the sugya that exists. So listen to this. Amr Abaye says, Kinafki mi beimar havasavano. When I left my Rebbe's home, when I left Rabbah, right? Abaye's Rebbe was Rabbah. When I left my Rebbe's home, Rabbah, I was full. I thought I was full. Kimatay lahasam. But when I got to the house of Mari bar Mar, when I got to the house of Mari, krivulu shisin tzoi the shisin minei kedera. They brought out 60 different types of cooked dishes, a smorgasbord, right? A whole bunch of stuff. Va'achli bahu shisin plugi, and I ate 60 portions. Right? Now, Lav Dafki ate all of them, but he ate a little bit of each of them. Listen to this. Ubishula basraisa, and the last thing they brought out, havukari lahu tzli kedar. They called this dish tzli kedar. We'll say, you know how they translate tzli kedar? Pot roast. They brought it. We'll say, now just say, what is a pot roast? What is a pot roast? So again, at least in the Gemara, it's just a piece of meat that you put into a pot, that you put then into an enclosed area, an oven to cook, and the meat cooks in its own juices. That's it. That's the pot roast. Uboy lemechas tsa'a abasra. And I was so hungry that I was ready to eat the plate right afterwards. Now I will say, I want to just share with you something amazing. The Marsha has a whole metaphoric idea over here that is not referring to food, but it's referring to Torah. And I will tell you, he then quotes another opinion that says, no, it is referring to food. This is absolutely incredible. I saw last night, quoted in the Sefer Daf al Daf, he quotes the Chidah. The Chidah says that when he was by Rav Rafal of Amsterdam, I don't know who that is, but he was by Rafal of Amsterdam. The Chidah did a whole hakaf, he did journeys. He speaks about, this is just, I'm going to send it to you. He was by Rafal of Amsterdam, and Rafal of Amsterdam was a very wealthy Talmud Chacham, and he describes the Shalach Manas that Rafal of Amsterdam received. And he received this Shalach Manas, this beautiful diorama of the palace of Achashverosh with Mordechai and Esther. Esther lying on the couch, like she was at the end of the Megillah. Mordechai in there, Achashverosh in there, Haman hanging from a tree, right? And the Chidah says they deliver this beautiful Shalach Manas. And the Chidah says, I don't understand, how is this Shalach Manas? It's a beautiful piece of art, but how is it Shalach Manas? How is it Shalach Manas? There was one more part. And on the diorama was a massive table. This must have been a huge thing. It was a massive table, and it had cheeses on it, and on the cheeses it said Kasher LePesach, and bottles of wine all over the courtyard of what would have been the courtyard of the palace of Achashverosh. And the Chidah sees this, and he says, I see it's a beautiful work of art, but I don't understand how it is Shalach Manas. He says, until I saw Rav Rafal of Amsterdam take a bite out of the palace. Right? The whole thing, he said, was made of sugar and icing and cake, except for the cheeses, which were real cheese and kasher lepesach, and the bottles of wine, which are real bottles of wine. I'm not dropping hints or anything. I'm just saying. So why am I sharing this with you? Why am I sharing this with you? Because the Chidah says, based on this Gemara, he says it's possible that in the house of, remember again, he's going to the house of Murray. They both say, you see this? You ever see sometimes they make plates out of food? Like they have this, right? Like a bread bowl, right? See, he says it's possible. It's incredible. So the Chidah says this after he visited Rav Ramsey. He says, I have new pshat in this Gemara that it's possible that when Abaye says I was ready to eat the plate, it was a bread bowl plate or some other kind of plate that was an edible plate as well. Of course, Pasha Pshat is Abaye is saying is everything was so good that I was ready to eat the plate as well. It is this. We'll say, Abaye says, I learned from this an important idea. Sometimes the poor man is hungry and he doesn't even know he's hungry. In other words, we'll say sometimes a person is so deprived that they don't even realize that they're deprived until they have something dramatic that they never had before. So Abai said, literally again, the poor person doesn't realize how hungry he is until ultimately, again, he has food. Inami, there's another thing that I learned from this. Ravcha lebesima shchiach. There's always more room for good food. So we'll say, so the second part is a little bit more like self-explanatory. We'll say, but the idea of the first part, that the poor person doesn't even realize that he's hungry until he has food, just says very profound. Sometimes in life, we don't even realize what we're missing until we find it. Hey, so the poor person doesn't even realize how deprived or how hungry he is until he has access to this incredible food. But it's true in Ruchnius as well. sometimes in ruchnius and spirituality, that I don't even realize what it is that I'm missing until I have it. Right? I think all of us have moments like that where we start doing something new in our ruchnius, right? And I want to say, like, where have you been all my life? Right? Daf Yomi, where have you been all my life? Tefillah, where have you been all my life? Chesed, whatever you fill in the blank. Every one of us, we all have these experiences. I start doing something, I take something on, I start doing something a little bit different. I'm like, wow, I never realized what was missing in my life until this particular moment. Because sometimes I'm spiritually impoverished as well. And I don't realize what I'm lacking until I finally have it. Such an incredible Gemara. Rabbi says, Abayi bar Abin, Rabbi Chanina bar Abin, Machlefi Seuda Sayo Lahadadi. So Rabbi say an interesting Gemara. Abayi bar Abin, Rabbi Chanina bar Abin used to swap their Seudos. Rabbi say, now Rashi says, Michlefi Seuda Sayo, Ze Ochel im Ze Bepurim Shal Shana Zu, Ubeshana Soy Chaverimo. So Rashi says what it means is they would alternate who would host the Purim Seuda. Right? 1 year, Abayi bar Abin would host, 1 year Rabbi Chanina bar Abin would host. The Maharsha says, who cares? Like, what does this matter to us? So the Maharsha says it actually means something different about it. It's teaching us a different halacha. Abayi bar Abin, Rabbi Chanina bar Abin did not have enough food to give both Shalach Manas and to have Sudas Purim. So instead what they did was as follows. They just swapped su'udos with each other. I'll give you the food for my su'udah. You give me the food for your su'udah. That way what? I fulfill the mitzvah of shalach manas. Because I'm giving 2 food items to someone else, but I still have what I need for my own su'udah. And that in fact is codified in Shulchan Aruch as a viable shalach manas option. If a person does not have enough for both su'udah and shalach manas, you could simply go ahead and swap your su'udah with someone else. Incredible. So Bosai, get ready for this Gemara. Okay, I'm going to try to pack it in 10 minutes. Here we go. Bosai, this is incredible. Amar Rava. Rava says, Mechayiv inish levasume bepurya ad lo yada. Bein R Avraham Menachem. Bosai, a person is obligated, literally again, to become fragrant, which means to become intoxicated on Purim until I don't know there's between R Avraham and Baruch Mordechai. Bosai, there is a mitzvah on Purim, and by the way, Lush doesn't mechayiv, a mitzvah on Purim to get drunk. And not just to get drunk, but to get really drunk until you don't know the difference between R Avraham and Baruch Mordechai. Then I both say, now listen, the Gemara tells a story. Rabbi Zera, Abdu Sudas Purim Bahadi Adayu. Rabbi and Rabbi Zera, they had Purim Suda together. What happened? Ivsim, they got drunk. Come Rabba Shachte Rabbi Zera. Rabba got up and he killed Rabbi Zera. Again, just drunkenness. So Rabbi say, the next year when Rabbi was sober, he davened and he brought Rabbi Zera back to life. So Lashana next year, Amarle, Nesim Avena Visudas Purim Bahadi Adadi. So Rabbi Zera, I have a great idea. Right, why don't we do Purim Suda together? Right? People often don't remember what happened last Purim. Right? So, why don't we do Purim Suda together? Say, Amarle, Rabbi Zera, I'm going to take a pass on that. Lo b'chol shaita v'shaita misrachish nisa. Miracles don't happen all of the time. So say, this is a fascinating story in a variety of levels. First of all, the Maharsha says Rabbah didn't kill Rabbi Zera. That's not what happened. When it says Shachte, what it means is Rabbah pushed Rabbi Zera to drink until he had alcohol poisoning. Right? Until again he was going to die. Either he was about to die or he did die because of overconsumption of alcohol. Which also tells you, by the way, that chas v'shalom, if you know how careful you have to be with who you dispense alcohol to and how much alcohol you dispense. Because chas v'shalom, if someone does chas v'shalom becomes sick or worse as a result of alcohol that you plied them with, there's responsibility for that. The Gemara says that Rabbi killed Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Marshal cannot fathom the idea that Rabbi actually killed Rabbi Zera. But again, he kept plying him with the alcohol until he became sick, either almost died or did die. So I will say, here's what's interesting about this Gemara, right? If you think about this, by the way, the flow is very strange. What's strange? Right? The Gemara begins with a statement. What's the statement? Get drunk on Purim. And then what's the next part of the Gemara? The Gemara records a story of 2 great Rabbanim who followed the advice of the Gemara, and yet what happened? Disaster. So I'll say, as a result, there's a school of Rishonim that say the conclusion of the Gemara is don't get drunk on Purim, because that's the whole point of the story, right? The Gemara tells you get drunk. Okay, let me show you what happens when people get really drunk. Therefore, again, the Rabbeinu Ephraim, others, paskin that halacha lemaisa, do not get drunk on Purim. Can you drink some wine? Sure, you could drink some wine. But the Rabbeinu Ephraim, a whole school of Rishonim will say, the point of the inclusion of the story is to teach us, do not get drunk on Purim. Then there's another school of thought, like the Rambam, famous Rambam, also quoted by the Rambam and Shulchan Aruch, that what does it mean? What does that mean? How do you reach a level where you don't know Durstin R Haman and Baruch Mordechai, but cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordechai? How do you reach that level? Rambam says, fall asleep. Fall asleep. Drink a little bit more than you're accustomed to until you get tired, right? Fall asleep, and therefore when you're asleep, you know Durstin R Haman and Baruch Mordechai. Then there's the position, the third school of thought that says you don't have to get drunk. Just drink a little bit more than you're normally accustomed to. So Rabbi says, so now here's what you have. You have really schools, four different opinions. Right, opinion number one, Rabbeinu Ephraim, story tells us, don't get drunk at all on Purim. Story number two, Rambam, drink until you're tired and fall asleep. Opinion number three, drink a little bit more than you're accustomed to. And then again, Rabbi say, there is still, as codified in the Shulchan Aruch, get drunk on Purim. But what's the point of the story? Rabbi say, what's the point of the story? Even when you get drunk on Purim, you have to be in control. And what I was say, in halacha there's a concept, it was called lot drunk. Right? What's the status of lot drunk? It's kind of self-explanatory, right? Right? Lot drunk is when a person can't even tell they're seeing right and wrong. That is never sanctioned in halacha. Even Rabbi say, and this is so important because people do the most inappropriate things on Purim under the umbrella of Simchas Purim. Anytime making a Chilul Hashem, or doing something that is inappropriate, or doing something that is questionable, or talking or acting in a way unbefitting of the Ben Torah of a Yid, it's not a mitzvah anymore. That's lot. That's lot drunk. So I just want to point out, even the opinions, like the Shulchan Aruch says, you should get drunk on Purim. When a Jew gets drunk, you know what it means when a Jew gets drunk? He sings miras. He says divrei Torah. He loves every single person, right? That's what happens when a Jew gets drunk. If a person's drunken behavior is anything other than that, then that's not what the halacha wants, and that's not what the halacha demands. I will say what I will share with you is something absolutely amazing. I'm going to send it out later on. In the back of the Gemara, and the newer Gemaras, there's something called Yalkut HaMefarshim. So that is kind of like a compilation. So I saw this a number of years ago, quotes the Chachmas Manoach. So the Chachmas Manoach says, what does this mean? Chayiv inish levasume b'puria ad lo yada bein R Avraham Menachem Mordechai. Both say it's even strange. Because what does it mean I should drink until I don't know the routine? Cursed is Haman, blessed is Mordechai. Both say, listen to this. It's worth it to spend time on this. Both say, the Chachmas Manoach says like this. Every person in life has their Mordechais and has their Hamans. Who are my Hamans? My Hamans are people who have hurt me. And people who have hurt me. Right? People who have objectively hurt me. Who are my Mordechais? My Mordechais are the people who I'm jealous of. They're people who have more than me, right? They're people who are more successful than me. People maybe who I begrudge because they have brachas that I think I should have. So every single one of us in life has our Hamans, people we don't like because we feel they've wronged us. Whether they have or they haven't, I feel like they've wronged me. My Mordechais are people I'm jealous of. We'll say, what's the whole yesod of Purim? What's the whole yesod of Purim? Is ultimately, again, achdus. Remember, Haman, the way Haman sold us down the river to Achashverosh, he said, Yeshno am echad mefuzar mefura min ha'amim. There's a nation, and even though they're small, and even though they're persecuted, they hate each other. They don't get along with each other. How could it be that a people who's persecuted can't even get along with each other? And you know what I'll say? Unfortunately, we can't say that Haman is always wrong. The whole yesod of Purim is achdus. But how do I make achdus? So we'll say, how could I be one with my Hamans and my Mordechais? You know what the answer is? You know, one word. You know what the one word? L'chaim. L'chaim. Something amazing happens when you make a l'chaim. When you drink a little bit of alcohol, Chachmas Manoach says, somehow, the interpersonal barriers come down. Sometimes you make a l'chaim, and a little bit of sharing a l'chaim together allows me to make shalom with my Mordechais and with my Hamans. Says the Chachmas Manoach, that's the avoda of Purim. Mechayev inish levasume b'puria. You're supposed to drink on Purim. Why? Adilo yada Bein Ar Hamal Marach Baruch Mordechai. The rest of the year, I hate that guy. I hate that guy. I hate him. I mamish hate him. I'm not even like mincing words. I hate him. He's a novel, not even Birshus HaTorah. Shalom Birshus HaTorah. The guy's a Rasha Marusha. Why? I forgot already. But all I know is that I mamish hate him like a Haman. And that guy, Mordechai, I hate him also. You know why? He has ala brachas. And yet I know he is such a Rasha. He doesn't deserve it. I deserve those brachas. And during the rest of the year, I hate this one, I hate this one, I hate this one, I hate this one. Purim is one day of the year. You can't hate anyone. You can't hate anyone. Okay, it's very nice. I can't hate anyone. Okay, I can't hate you. But I still hate you. Sometimes a little bit of drinking together, a couple of l'chaims has the ability to bring down barriers that are up the rest of the year. That, says the Chachmas Manoach, is the avoda of drinking on Purim. It's not a goal to become drunk, but it's a goal sometimes that in order to create shalom, and in order to be able to forge relationships, sometimes we need a little bit of alcoholic help, right? Sometimes a person needs some spirits in order to be able to help them in the process of creation shalom. Should we be able to do it without the l'chaim? Sure. But sometimes the little bit of assistance we have on Purim goes a long way for the shalom of Klal Yisrael. Let's go weiter. Amar Rava, Sudas Purim Shachla Balayla Yotzei Chavaso. So again, if a person eats the Su'udah of Purim at night, they're not Yotzei. My time, what's the reason? Yemei Mishta v'Simcha Ksiv. Because the pasuk says days of Mishta and Simcha. Rav Ashi say you have to have the Purim Suda day, which is very important because we'll say the concept of drinking, by the way, on Purim, is part of Suda. Right? Remember again, there's no independent mitzvah of drinking. So there's no mitzvah of drinking at night on Purim. It's only by day and by the way, even by day, only when? As part of the Suda. So we'll say, why? Because it says Yimei Mishta. Rav Ashi Rabbi Yosef Kamed Rav Kana, Rav Yosef Kamed Rav Kana, Naga V'lo Asra Banan. Rav Ashi was sitting in the base medrash. It was getting late on Purim day, and no one showed up in the base medrash. Amarle my time V'lo Asra Banan. Why have the rabbis not showed up for sure in the base medrash? Right? Dilma treaty b'sudas Purim. Maybe. So ultimately, again, Rav Kana says, well, maybe they're still eating their Sudas Purim. So Rashi says, why couldn't they eat the Sudas Purim last night? Why are they eating the Sudas Purim today? We have Shir today. Rashi, a very brave man, making Shir on Purim day. Right? So I'll say, why are they having Suda today? They could have had Suda last night. Amarle, no, lo shmir le lamar, hada amarava, Sudas Purim sha'achla balayla lo yatzei chavaso. Have you not heard the halacha that says that if you eat the Su'udah at night, you have not fulfilled your obligation? Amar Le, Amar Rav Hachid, did Rav really say this? Amar Le, he said, yes. Tanamine arba zimnin vidami le keman damanach. So it says beautiful. Rav Ashi reviewed this ruling 40 times. And only after having reviewed it 40 times did he feel ultimately again that literally it was solidly placed in his pocket, which Moshe is also another beautiful lesson. And we know this because this is one of the major struggles of Daf Yomi, which is retention. For all of us, I include myself in that. The ability to retain that which we learn is such a hard thing, but sometimes it's only by reviewing that ultimately we retain, and it's only by retention that something truly becomes ours. So we'll just do one more little Mishnah in Gemara. Ein ben Yom Tov l'Shabbos elo rosei. We're now going to get to what's called in Maseches Megillah the Ein Bein Sugyas. Ein Bein literally means there is no difference. So Ein Bein Yom Tov l'Shabbos elo ochel nefesh bilvad. So the Mishnah says there is no difference between Shabbos and Yom Tov except ochel nefesh, which Rabbosai means what? Shabbos and Yom Tov are the same. All of the malachas on Shabbos apply Yom Tov as well. With one notable exception, ochel nefesh, food preparation. So the Gemara says, what do you see from here? Both says back to our Beya days. Machshiri ochel nefesh. So what are machshiri ochel nefesh? Preparatory acts. What's a good example of that? Who remembers? Sharpening your knife for shechita. Right? Everyone agrees I'm allowed to shecht on Yom Tov. But what about sharpening my knife? Can I do that? That's machshirin. So Both says the Mishnah makes it sound like machshirin are aser on Yom Tov as well. Telok Rabbi Yehuda. It's not Rabbi Yehuda. The sign Ein Ben Yom Tov Shabbos Ala Ochel Nefesh. Rabbi Yehuda Matir Af Machshirei Ochel Nefesh. Shabbos say Rabbi Yehuda says even Machshirei Ochel Nefesh are permitted on Yom Tov. So my Tana the Tanakama. Why does the Tanakama say the Machshirin are aser? Amrikra who v'lo Machshirav. Shabbos say the pasuk says who only Ochel Nefesh is mutter, but not Machshirin. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Lachem l'chol tzarcheichem. Rabbi Yehuda says lachem. Lachem means anything you need to do. Even what? Even machshirin. So v'idach Nami haksiv lachem. What does the Tanakama do with lachem? Lachem v'lo kochavim. That teaches me ultimately I could do what I need for Jews, but I cannot do malacha on Yom Tov for the sake of non-Jews. Lachem v'lo klavim. Assuming again you could do achal nefesh for yourself, but not for your animals. V'idach, Rabbi Yehuda, hana miksiv hu. What does he do with who? Ksiv hu, ksiv lachem. Kama machshir she'efshar la'asos merav Yom Tov. Kama machshir she'efshar la'asos merav Yom Tov. Ultimately, also Rabbi Yehuda holds, you're right. Even I who say that you could do machshirin on Yom Tov, which machshirin is that? Only machshirin which could not have been done before Yom Tov with the same qualitative results. But even Rabbi Yehuda will say, even I agree that machshirin which could be done before Yom Tov with the same qualitative results cannot be done prior to Yom Tov. They both say, by the way, I'll point out, that's how we paskin halacha l'maisa, right? We paskin that any machshiri ochel nefesh, which could be done before Yom Tov with the same qualitative results, cannot be done on Yom Tov. But argument's sake, anything that could not have been done before Yom Tov could technically be done on Yom Tov. So we'll stop over here for today. Shkayach everyone, incredible daf. I'll think about the Mishnah tomorrow.